I arrived at my school bright and early on a very foggy and smug Thursday morning. Today was the day of the highly anticipated senior trip to Disney World. Towards the end of the year, seniors get to choose between going to Disney World in Orlando or visiting Niagara Falls. It is almost always Disney World every year. This trip made the entire year worthwhile. As I arrived, my best friends Matt, Dan, and Evan greeted me. I was going to be rooming with them for the 4 days we spent in the Caribbean beach hotel. I jumped out of the car, wiping the crust from my eyes, and I wheeled my suitcase inside after hugging my dad and saying goodbye. "You ready for 4 days of freedom?" Matt said as we headed on the bus to the airport. "Shut up, man. You know the teachers are going to be up our ass the whole trip and follow us through the park," I mentioned. Matt looked at me with defeated eyes, since he knew I was right. As we got situated on the bus, I was seated next to Matt, and across from us were Evan and Dan. So, I figured we would go to downtown Disney to get some shopping done later today once we get there, since everyone will be crowding the parks, which leaves us 3 days to hit up Magic Kingdom, Epcot, Hollywood Studios, and the Animal Kingdom Evan suggested. He was right. Everyone would crowd the main parks the first day. Plus, we can get our shopping for souvenirs out of the way. We all agreed and talked about how excited we were to be away from our parents for a weekend, what rides we wanted to go on, and where we should go out to eat for the 30-minute trip to the airport. After a bus ride of trying to keep my eyes open and initiated in the conversation, we finally arrived. We were escorted off the bus and into the airport. On the way in, I bumped into a very fragile, pale and skinny looking old man. "Excuse me, sir. I'm so sorry I didn't see you," I said. He looked at me and whispered something I didn't quite understand and stood right in front of me. He looked at me and said, "Red hair, blue eyes," which was my hair color and eye color. Confused and a little freaked out, I made my way past the man, caught up with my group, and traveled on through the airport. I'll spare you the details of going through security, but eventually we finally were able to walk on the plane. Our entire senior class and about 20 chaperones, which was just a fancy word for teachers who will watch our every move, crowded the plane. I felt bad for the few other citizens not a part of our massive group who had to deal with the loud, obnoxious high school kids for an entire flight. As I went to sit down next to Dan, he pointed out to me my ticket didn't show the same row as him. Pissed off, I went and sat down in the empty row at the back of the plane that was printed on my ticket. I wondered what Dan, Evan, and Matt were talking about. They're probably talking about some lame stuff anyway, I reassured myself. Being optimistic, I was starting to get excited about the trip and the fact that I might get this row all to myself. My hopes were soon crushed as I saw that same old fragile man limping down the aisle. Of course, just my luck, I muttered to myself. Just as I suspected, he sat right next to me. I didn't say hello, mainly because my stomach was in knots due to this man's ghostly appearance. No words were exchanged to each other the entire flight. I don't like making conversation anyway, so I didn't mind. The flight would have been relatively normal for my standards if it weren't for that old man whispering the words "Magic Kingdom" to himself the entire flight. Although weird, I just assumed the guy loved the Magic Kingdom. Once I heard the pilot announced we were landing, I was relieved to get away from this man. As I practically leapt out of my seat, I felt a cold hand grasp my wrist. I looked down in pure shock to see the man with a sinister look on his face. I broke my wrist free and told him aggressively to never lay a finger on me again. I quickly walked through the plane, butting ahead of people, fearing that the man was following me. I finally found my group as we got off the plane and told them what happened. "Stop lying to try and make us feel bad. It's not our fault you were in a different row," Dan said. Realizing it wasn't worth arguing, I brushed them off and moved to baggage claim with them. Again, I'll spare you the details of the airport experience, but we eventually arrived at our hotel, Caribbean Beach. Once the teacher showed us our rooms, we quickly put our suitcases in our room and hurried out the door. The teachers made an announcement saying we won't be let back in the rooms until 11 p.m. Seeing it was 3 p.m. now, we figured we would have plenty of time to shop. We were waiting for the bus to come pick us up and take us to downtown Disney, where all the shopping outlets were located. As I was getting on the bus, I realized I left my phone and wallet in our room. I told them to leave me here, and I'd just catch the next bus. Considering the buses come every 3 minutes to various places, I didn't think I'd have to wait long. They all mutually agreed, and Dan said with a smirk, "Call us when you get there, and watch out for the big scary man from the plane." I brushed him off again and hustled back to the room. I got the key card from the teacher that was in charge of the block of rooms I was in, and I got my belongings. As I jogged back to the bus stop, I saw there was a bus waiting that said Downtown Disney on the destination. Perfect, I muttered to myself. It was only 3:22, which means I didn't lose much time. I jumped on and looked up to the driver and said thank you. As I sat down, I looked forward and felt my stomach drop. The man from the airport in the plane was sitting across from me, looking directly into my eyes with his dark, soulless eyes. The bus started to move, and as he stared at me, I looked back at him and completely lost my temper on him. "Hey man, I said I'm sorry for bumping into you at the airport. What's your deal? Can you please stop following me? I'm so tired of seeing you. You're creeping me the hell out." Once I said that, his eyes quickly shifted to anger, like the ones when he was grabbing my wrist. I felt kind of bad, but I justified my actions because he was definitely being weird. In the midst of my thoughts, the old man lifted his long and pointy finger at me and started to say, "Magic Kingdom," over and over. I was getting extremely paranoid because the man was getting louder. During this time, I felt the bus accelerating faster and faster. It seemed the louder the man got, the faster the bus moved. I yelled out to the bus driver for help, but when I looked up, I saw in disbelief that there was no bus driver, and we were driving at an unnatural speed in what looked like the dead of night. My ears were deafened by this man's ugly scream. I covered my ears and hit the floor hard. As these events unfold, the screaming stopped. I shot up to grab the man, but he was gone. The bus isn't moving anymore. I quickly pulled out my phone to try and call someone, but my phone won't unlock. All it displayed was the time. The time was 2:42 a.m. I rubbed my eyes and pinched myself to look again. 2:42 a.m. Horrified, I heard the bus door open abruptly. Once it was open, I looked outside and saw none other than the Magic Kingdom. But something was off. All the lights were on, and I heard loud, distorted theme park music playing from inside the park. I got off the bus and felt the humid air hit my body. The park should be closed this late at night, I told myself. As I tried to collect my thoughts, I heard Matt call out from the gates of the park, "Mike, we're over here." "Where the hell were you, man? We waited all day." Distraught at his remark, I yelled, "Matt, what is going on here?" Right after I said that, out of nowhere I heard loud footsteps trotting behind me. I snapped my head around to see an inhumanly tall figure chasing me with unreal strides. I yelped out in fear as it chased me to the front gates of the park. I gazed in horror at the locked gates and accepted my fate as the footsteps got closer and closer. Right before they got to me, everything stopped. The footsteps, the music, the lights, everything. I quickly realized Matt, or any of my friends for that matter, were not at the gates. I yelled out, hoping for a reply, but was greeted with nothing but silence while the front gates flew open. My eyes gathered at a dead, empty park. Not knowing what to do, I slowly walked in. The gates slammed behind me, making me jump in fear, realizing I probably made the wrong decision. I swung back around to try and open the gates, but it wouldn't budge. I started to yell out in fear and anger as I started to kick the gates to try and get them to open. Once I determined this gate wasn't going to open, I turned around and wiped a stray tear from my cheek. I was not familiar with the layout of Magic Kingdom at all, so I had no idea what to do or where to go. Furthermore, I started on through the park very slowly down Main Street until I froze in fear. My blood ran cold and my fingers felt like pins and needles as I saw the silhouette of what looked to be at least a dozen Disney mascots standing taller than any of the buildings on Main Street. Their long, lanky legs shook the ground around me as they took each step. At this point, I had no idea what I was even looking at. Once I turned my head back to look for a place to hide, I heard the worst blood-curdling scream. This is all it took for me to get up and start sprinting. I think I went into shock, because making a run for it was the worst decision. Not knowing what I was running from or where I was running to, I started hearing the same footsteps from when I got off the bus behind me, but this time, they sounded louder, almost like there were hundreds of them. I started crying out for help as I made the grave mistake to look back. Behind me were countless Disney mascots and animatronic-looking beings of all sizes chasing me. Once I turned my head around, I must have slowed down, because that's the last thing I remember. I woke up in a hospital bed. The nurse asked me how I was feeling, and I asked her what happened. She told me I was found in the middle of the Magic Kingdom at opening time, screaming and flailing around. She said a police officer will be in to speak with me shortly. 2 officers walked in momentarily after she told me this. Once I told them my story, they told me they'd come back later when I wasn't drugged up on medicine to get the real story, while he whispered something inaudible to the officer next to him. I know what happened to me. I know that wasn't a cover-up story. As it turns out, I am not the only person to experience this. From my research, there's a small community of people who have the exact same story that I have. I'm issuing this story out on the web as a warning. Stay away from the man I encountered at the airport. These individuals left me with advice I wish I knew going into this trip. If this man bumps into you, you must not speak a word to him. Once you say something to him, you have opened yourself up to whatever the hell I just experienced. After that, no one can help you, and you are on your own.